Hi, I'm Eason, and welcome back to Metal Monday, where I talk about albums new and old that I recommend you listen to so you can start your week off right. I haven't listened to nearly enough grindcore this year, and it wasn't as if there was a shortage of awesome grind albums to choose from, and it wasn't as if I didn't like them. It was just that this year has been more about black metal for me than anything else, but regardless of that, there were still a couple releases that I have been anticipating, and you might even say was excited for. One of them was the second release of a Polish outfit that I had enjoyed the living shit out of back in 2018. In fact, I had enjoyed it enough for it to be one of the first albums that I ever reviewed on this channel, back when it was supposed to have been called The Perpetual Now. Oh, what strides we have made. The album that I'm talking about is Hostia's Carnivore Carnival. Now try saying that 3 times fast. Comfy there, Lamsey? Alright, let's go. My favorite thick-ass hardcore and death metal influenced grind outfit, Hostia, is finally back after 2 years of silence in this, the year of our Lord 2020, the most fucked up year I have seen so far. Now, for those of you who are just tuning in, who don't know who Hostia is or have no idea about their debut, somewhere up there a link should have appeared leading you to my review of their debut album. But by way of introductions, Hostia is a grindcore outfit from Warsaw, Poland, who specialize in, well, grindcore with very pronounced death metal and hardcore influences blended in. They distinguish themselves from their peers by not having grindcore be the only or sole focus of their music, but instead forming the backbone of it, onto which the rest of the skeleton, made mostly by hardcore and death metal, is attached. And also, by way of St. Sixtus's gravelly, extremely rough, kind of like razor blades sliding down his throat as he tries to scream type death growls that form the vocals. And this was more or less the shape of things in their debut. They were providing some hardcore and death metal infused grind to the masses, but things have changed just a little bit since then. First of all, Carnivore Carnival sports a much more clearer grindcore focus at its core, and as such, in cranking up the speed dial just that little bit, the band has come up with a more nimble sound. Their sound is a little bit more lithe. It's a little bit leaner in terms of the muscle that it brings. It's faster, yes, but it's also lighter, which also means that Hostia has sacrificed some of the thick aspects of itself that I loved so much in their debut. Not exactly in a bad way, because the speeds that they have managed to achieve in this one, which are just that little bit more than their debut, are well worth the sacrifice. Furthermore, as paradoxical as this might sound, while the focus on grindcore is a bit more clearer, perhaps due to the way that the track list is structured, they have also managed to incorporate new influences into the music and at times sort of deviate from this completely. I know this is a little bit abstract, but let me explain. After the late George Carlin makes an appearance in the intro, the band wastes no time launching headlong into the uncompromising and brutal grindcore stylings that they are forming the backbone of their music out of. The first few tracks, Wastes, Krasnodar's Kitchen, and Grind the Filth, all feature familiar hardcore punk-influenced riffs, loads of blast beats, and St. Sixtus just sort of growling on top of it. And it looks as though the album is going to be a lot more straightforward at this point. However, then we arrive at the track Fire Walks With Me. Fire Walks With Me is significant mainly because it is the first appearance, first hint at the main influence that is going to be permeating throughout the track list, even though somewhat intermittently, which is thrash metal. The track itself injects very minimal amounts of thrash into its riffs and brings gang shouts to the table in order to solidify the feeling that yes, Hostia is leaning more towards crossover thrash as well. And in that regard, Carnivore Carnival strikes an interesting balance between the more traditional grindcore tracks and the deviations from that particular norm. And while we're talking about more traditional grindcore stylings, it has to be mentioned that 2 tracks on this album, namely Witchfucker and Have a Faith both explore the moodier, more oppressive side of Deathgrind. These are more traditional Deathgrind tracks that you might recognize as being stylistically similar to the output of bands like Nasum or Gadget, and the amount of mood, the amount of atmosphere that Hostia is able to generate in these really makes me wish that they explored this just a little bit more, because they clearly have it in them. On the thrash side of things, there's Jason's Cardio, where these influences finally come out fully into the open, and the band provides you with this really nice, really chuggy sort of thrash style riff, which they then meld with grindcore. And then there is No Longer. No Longer exists as sort of the equal 50-50 division between the grindcore influences and the thrash influences that the band is fucking with on this album. This track opens with a really technical sounding, albeit somewhat simple, frenetic, and instantly memorable riff, accompanied by suitably frantic drumming. And on the whole, No Longer is this really royally pissed off, both middle fingers in the air, fuck you to organized religion, and in a big way. The track uses its precision and instrumentation to form a very nice contrast with Saint Sixtus seemingly endlessly spewing worse and worse blasphemies at the viewer, which forms for a very angry but still very enjoyable and extremely fun track. Similar to how No Longer splits the difference 50-50, there's also the track We Did It, which starts out more as a crossover thrash track and then sort of veers into slam death territories of all things. This sort of genre shifting is also one of the things that keeps the track list highly entertaining and dynamic, which is something that Hostia has also managed to do quite well in their debut. Their ability to keep things exciting and dynamic owes much to the fact that even though they don't venture too far outside of the framework that they have set for themselves, they make sure that they explore their own territory fully. Two examples of this type of cautious exploration would be Church Burner, which is a heavier set hardcore track that slows things down but also injects a little groove into the proceedings, and the interesting instance of Death by Sawing, which is basically a D-beat gore grind track, pure and simple. Of course, this being a Hostia album, I had two very specific expectations. One, an appearance by the almighty cowbell that the band had made great use of on their debut, and two, a jaunty, jumpy, danceable, really fun track, and on both fronts they haven't disappointed. The appearance of the cowbell, also known as the instrument of the gods, takes place on the track God's Coffin, which is accompanied by this really jaunty, really cheery, really danceable riff and nice feel of rhythm. But the funnest track on this record, the video for which just ended up looking like one long marriage proposal, is Dance for Jesus. Dance for Jesus takes every element from this album, all the musical influences, the overall theme of being anti-religion, which has been present since the band's inception, and puts them into one danceable, tongue-in-cheek, extremely fun, extremely entertaining, and woefully short package. One complaint that I do have about Carnivore Carnival, though, regards to the track list, because Dance for Jesus is pretty much the perfect closer to this album, but inexplicably it goes on for one more track, and the closer, Panzer Church, is a nice enough song, but it is more in line with the more traditional grindcore tracks scattered throughout the tracklist of this record, so I think it would have been better if it was cut or just placed elsewhere entirely. Since this is a video by me, I'm of course going to mention the production on this album, which is going hand in hand with the slight shift in musical direction, a little bit leaner, a little bit less intense, and a little bit less thick than the previous record. The guitars are crisp, nice, and in the forefront. Saint Sixtus's vocals come through loud and clear. The bass is just a little bit buried, but it is mean and sharp enough to be audible when it wants to be. And although the snare has lost a little bit of its girth, it is still very prominent and very nicely mixed in, so overall, it's a good production job. I mean, what else can I say but that Hostia fucking brought it? And I was really cautious in approaching this album because I have seen the sophomore slump bring down even the most stalwart of bands, but luckily, these guys have proven to be the exception. If you are in any way a Deathgrind fan, a death metal fan, a grindcore fan, a hardcore punk fan who likes a bit of the rougher stuff, you are going to find something to enjoy in this album. Crossover thrash fans who like a little bit of grind in their proceedings should also tune in because they're going to find things that they're going to enjoy, intercut with things that may be new to them or may be unexplored for them. The enunciation of that was really fucking weird. As always, there's a Bandcamp link in the description of this video, so why don't you go click that, listen to it, and then come back and tell me if you think I'm full of shit. If you have already listened to this album, why don't you let me know if you think I'm full of shit in the comments down below. If you like my content, please like, comment, and subscribe, as it always helps, and as always, it's Eason. Peace out. Oh, and just to add, I'm not going to be making an end of the year list because there were a lot of albums that I have neglected to talk about before I established the schedule that I'm going by now. And I want to talk about each of them in turn instead of doing a cop-out mini review in a list type video. So stay tuned.